At the family reunion, my sister whispered, "Check the envelope." Then I understood. That's what I want to tell you about today, because what happened at that reunion changed everything I thought I knew about my family. And maybe after hearing this, you'll understand why some secrets are kept for decades, hidden behind smiles and carefully rehearsed stories. It was supposed to be a normal gathering, the kind we had every summer at my aunt's house in Connecticut, with the same familiar faces, the same potato salad recipe, the same jokes we'd heard 100 times before. But this year felt different from the moment I walked through that door. My sister Emma met me in the hallway, and instead of her usual warm hug, she grabbed my arm with an urgency I'd never seen in her eyes before. Her voice was barely a whisper when she said those 4 words that would unravel everything. "Check the envelope." I didn't know what she meant at first, standing there confused while relatives brushed past us toward the dining room. What envelope? I hadn't received anything unusual in the mail, hadn't noticed anything out of place. But Emma's expression told me this wasn't a joke or a misunderstanding. She squeezed my hand once, then disappeared into the crowd of aunts and uncles, leaving me with a knot of anxiety growing in my chest. I spent the next hour pretending to enjoy conversations about weather and work while my mind raced through possibilities. Then I remembered the cream-colored envelope I'd found in my mailbox 2 days earlier, addressed to me in handwriting I didn't recognize, with no return address. I'd thrown it in my bag meaning to open it later and completely forgot about it until that moment. When I finally excused myself and found a quiet corner to look inside, my hands were shaking. The single sheet of paper contained just a few typed lines, but those words confirmed what Emma had been trying to tell me, what she'd discovered weeks ago and had been carrying alone until she could warn me face to face. Now I understood why she looked so tired, why her voice cracked when she called me last Tuesday asking if I was definitely coming to the reunion. Before I share what comes next, I want to know, where are you listening to this story from? What city or region? Drop a comment and let me know, because what happened next involves a truth that exists in families everywhere, hiding in plain sight. The envelope contained a birth certificate, but not mine, not in the way I expected anyway. The name on it was mine, the date was correct, but the parents listed weren't the people who raised me. My mother's name appeared in a different space, under a different title, and suddenly the world tilted sideways as I stood there in my aunt's guest bathroom, gripping the sink for balance while decades of memories rearranged themselves into a new and terrifying pattern. I could hear laughter echoing from the backyard where everyone had gathered for the barbecue, could smell the charcoal smoke drifting through the window, and it all felt surreal, like I was watching my life from outside my body. Emma found me 20 minutes later, still sitting on the closed toilet lid with the paper clutched in my hands. She locked the door behind her and sat down on the edge of the bathtub, and for a long moment neither of us spoke. Then she started talking, her voice low and careful, explaining how she'd found out 3 months ago when she was helping clean out our grandmother's attic after she moved to assisted living. There was a box, Emma said, hidden behind decades of Christmas decorations and old photo albums. A box that grandmother had probably forgotten existed, or maybe hoped would stay buried forever. Inside were letters, documents, photographs that told a story our family had agreed never to tell. Emma showed me some of them on her phone, pictures she'd taken before our mother discovered what she was doing and made her promise not to say anything. Not yet, not until the right time. But Emma couldn't let me walk into this reunion completely unprepared. Couldn't watch me smile and joke with people while carrying this enormous secret alone. The woman I'd called Mom my entire life was actually my aunt, my biological mother's sister. My real mother, the one whose name was on that birth certificate, was the woman I'd known as Aunt Patricia, the quiet one who never married, who always seemed a little sad around holidays, who watched me with an intensity I'd mistaken for ordinary family affection. Patricia was at the reunion, of course, standing by the grill talking to my uncle about something trivial, probably weather or traffic, and I realized I'd been looking at her my whole life without really seeing her. Emma explained that Patricia had been 19 when she got pregnant, still in college, planning a future that didn't include a baby. The father was someone she dated briefly, someone who disappeared when she told him the news, And in that era, in that family, in that small Connecticut town where everyone knew everyone's business, there weren't many options that didn't involve shame and whispers and doors closing on opportunities. So her older sister, the woman I called Mom, offered a solution. She and her husband had been trying to have children for years without success, and they offered to raise the baby as their own, to give Patricia a chance to finish school and build the life she dreamed about. It was supposed to be temporary at first, Emma told me, just until Patricia got on her feet. But temporary became permanent when everyone realized how well the arrangement worked, how natural it looked to the outside world. Patricia could be involved in her child's life without the stigma, could watch her baby grow up while maintaining her reputation and her opportunities. My parents got the child they desperately wanted, and I got a stable home with two people who loved me completely, even if they weren't biologically mine. It made sense in a heartbreaking kind of way, understanding why Patricia never left town even when she got job offers elsewhere, why she was at every birthday party and school play, why she knew exactly what gifts I wanted before I asked. I thought about all the times she'd hugged me a little too long, all the moments she'd looked at me with tears in her eyes that I'd attributed to her sensitive nature. Emma was still talking, filling in details about how our grandmother had orchestrated everything, how she'd convinced everyone it was the best solution, how the whole family had maintained the fiction for 28 years. But I barely heard her because my mind was stuck on one terrible question. Did Patricia want to tell me, or was she content to keep playing the role of favorite aunt forever? Emma didn't know the answer to that, admitted she'd been too afraid to ask directly, worried about causing more pain than necessary. The plan, she said, was that our parents were supposed to tell me before the reunion, were supposed to sit me down and explain everything so we could all move forward together. But they'd chickened out, decided to wait a little longer. Maybe after the reunion, maybe next month, maybe never if they could avoid it. That's when Emma realized she had to intervene, had to make sure I knew before I sat down at that dinner table surrounded by people who all knew a truth I didn't. I asked her why now, why after all these years was this secret suddenly surfacing, and she explained that Patricia had been diagnosed with a serious illness, something that made her start thinking about mortality and regrets, about all the things she wished she'd done differently. Patricia had apparently told our grandmother that she wanted to tell me the truth before it was too late, wanted a chance to have an honest relationship with me, whatever that might look like. Our mother, the woman who raised me, panicked when she heard this, terrified of losing me, of having 28 years of motherhood invalidated by biology and timing. The family had been in crisis mode for months, Emma said, with everyone taking sides, arguing about what was best, what was fair, what I deserved to know. And now here I was, standing in a bathroom at a family reunion, holding proof of a secret that had shaped my entire existence, wondering how I was supposed to walk back out there and pretend everything was normal. Emma reached over and squeezed my hand, told me I didn't have to pretend, didn't have to perform for anyone anymore, that whatever I decided to do next would be the right choice because it would be mine to make. But that was the problem, wasn't it? I had no idea what the right choice even looked like in this situation. No roadmap for navigating a revelation this massive, this life-altering and world-changing, this fundamentally destabilizing to everything I thought I understood about my identity. I eventually left the bathroom and rejoined the party, though I felt like an imposter moving through a scene that no longer belonged to me. Patricia was still by the grill, now helping my uncle flip burgers, and I watched her from across the yard, trying to see her through this new lens, trying to reconcile the aunt I'd known with the mother I'd never been allowed to have. Emma stayed close to me, a protective presence that kept other relatives from asking too many questions about why I looked so pale, why I wasn't eating, why I kept disappearing to the porch whenever the crowd got too loud. The afternoon dragged on with agonizing slowness, each minute stretching into an eternity while I wrestled with impossible decisions. Should I confront Patricia right there at the reunion, in front of everyone who'd kept this secret? Should I pull my parents aside and demand explanations? Should I leave quietly and process this alone before making any moves I couldn't take back? Emma whispered that I should wait, that reacting in anger or shock never led anywhere good. But part of me wanted to flip that table and watch the potato salad fly, wanted to see the carefully maintained facade crack and crumble under the weight of honesty. Around sunset, Patricia approached me while I was standing alone near the fence, looking out at the Connecticut hills that suddenly felt foreign despite being the landscape of my childhood. She stood beside me quietly for a moment, and I wondered if she could sense that I knew, if she'd been watching me all afternoon the way I'd been watching her. Then she started talking about the weather, about how beautiful the light looked at this hour, about how she'd always loved this particular view from my aunt's backyard. Her voice carried something different now, something I might have called wistfulness if I'd been feeling generous, desperation if I was being honest. I wanted to scream at her to stop pretending, to acknowledge the elephant crushing us both, but instead I just nodded and made polite responses while my heart hammered against my ribs. She mentioned that she'd been meaning to talk to me, that there were things she wanted to say, and for a terrifying moment I thought she was going to confess everything right there, with the sound of children playing in the background and the smell of citronella candles drifting through the evening air. But then someone called her name, needed her opinion on dessert arrangements, and she touched my arm briefly before walking away, and I was left standing there with all the words I couldn't say caught in my throat like broken glass. Emma found me again after dark, when most people had moved inside to escape the mosquitoes and the gathering chill. She asked if I was okay, and I almost laughed at the absurdity of the question, as if okay was something I'd ever be again. She told me about the rest of what she'd found in grandmother's box, details she hadn't wanted to dump on me all at once, but that I needed to know if I was going to make sense of any of this. Patricia had written letters, Emma said, dozens of them over the years, addressed to me but never sent, stored in that box along with every school photo, every achievement certificate, every newspaper clipping that mentioned my name. Patricia had been documenting my life from the sidelines, creating a parallel record of my existence that only she could access, a secret scrapbook of the motherhood she'd traded away. Emma showed me photos of some of these letters on her phone, and I could see Patricia's handwriting, could see how it changed over the years from the round loops of a young woman to the more controlled script of someone who'd learned to contain her emotions. The letters detailed ordinary moments, first days of school and lost teeth and teenage heartbreaks, but they were written with the intensity of someone recording sacred events, someone who knew she was watching from a distance that could never be closed. I thought about all the times Patricia had asked me questions about school or friends, how she'd always seemed so invested in the details of my life, and I'd thought it was just because she was a particularly attentive aunt, never suspecting it was because every piece of information was precious to her, every story a glimpse into the life she'd given up. Emma asked what I was going to do, and I told her the truth, that I had no idea, that I was barely holding myself together, that I needed time to think before I made any decisions. She understood, said she'd support me whatever I chose, and I believed her because Emma had always been the one person in this family I could count on for honesty. As the reunion wound down and people started gathering their things, saying goodbyes and making promises to get together again soon, I caught Patricia looking at me from across the living room. Our eyes met, and in that moment I saw her clearly for the first time, saw the sadness and longing and guilt all mixed together in an expression I'd mistaken my entire life for simple familial affection. She smiled at me, a small sad smile, and I realized she knew that I knew, that maybe she'd known the moment I came back from the bathroom with my world rearranged. The envelope had done exactly what Emma intended it to do. It had opened my eyes to a truth that had been hiding in plain sight all along. I drove home that night in silence, my mind replaying every interaction I'd ever had with Patricia, recontextualizing 28 years of memories through this new understanding. The woman who taught me to ride a bike wasn't just being a supportive aunt, she was seizing precious moments with the child she'd given birth to. The woman who cried at my college graduation wasn't overcome with pride for her niece. She was watching her daughter achieve the education she'd sacrificed her own motherhood to ensure Patricia could complete. Every holiday, every phone call, every piece of advice had been filtered through this enormous secret, and I'd been completely oblivious, happily living a lie everyone else had agreed to maintain. When I got home, I pulled out my own box of old photos and started going through them, looking at every picture that included Patricia with new eyes. There she was at my 5th birthday party, standing slightly apart from the group, watching me blow out candles with an expression I'd always thought was just camera shyness. There she was at my high school plays, Always in the audience, always alone, always watching with that same intense focus I'd never questioned. The evidence had been there all along, written in her face, in her body language, in the way she'd oriented her entire life around remaining close to mine. I wondered how many other people knew, whether it was just immediate family or if extended relatives had been let in on the secret, whether I'd been the only one kept in the dark or if there were others who'd never been told. I thought about confronting my parents, demanding to know why they'd thought lying to me for nearly 3 decades was acceptable. But part of me already knew what they'd say, that they'd done it for my benefit, to give me a stable childhood, to protect me from confusion or pain. They'd probably argue that they were my real parents in every way that mattered, that biology was less important than the years of care and love they'd provided. And they wouldn't be entirely wrong, which made everything even more complicated. The truth was, I didn't know how to feel about any of it, didn't know if I was supposed to be angry or grateful, betrayed or understanding. My parents had given me everything, a good home, unconditional love, opportunities and support, and the kind of childhood people dream about. But they'd also built it all on a foundation of lies, had let me form relationships with people based on incorrect information about who we were to each other. And Patricia. What about Patricia? She'd made an impossibly difficult choice at 19, had given up her child so she could finish college and build a career, and then she'd spent the rest of her life orbiting around the edges of my existence, close enough to watch but never close enough to claim me. Was she brave or cowardly? Selfless or selfish? The answer was probably both. Probably all of it at once. And I was too tired and overwhelmed to sort through the ethical implications of decisions made decades before I was old enough to have an opinion. What I did know was that nothing would ever be quite the same again, that every future family gathering would carry the weight of this knowledge, that I couldn't unknow what I now knew or unfeel what I was currently feeling. The envelope Emma told me to check had done more than reveal a secret. It had fundamentally altered the architecture of my understanding, had shifted the ground beneath my feet in ways I was still trying to measure. And somewhere in Connecticut, Patricia was probably lying awake wondering if today was the day everything changed, if the careful balance she'd maintained for 28 years was about to collapse, if the daughter she'd watched from a distance was finally going to demand the truth she'd always deserved. The answer, I realized as dawn started breaking through my bedroom window, was yes. But not yet. Not until I figured out what kind of relationship I wanted with the woman who gave birth to me. Not until I decided whether knowing the truth made me feel more lost or more found. Think about that for a moment.